Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on a dust-up over the courts and independence questions. But first, pipeline pressure.
The Prime Minister claims to have changed his mind in a recent MOU. So will he be able to change the minds of fellow Liberals and vote for his own MOU and allow a pipeline to the Pacific?
Pressure on the Carney government ahead of a non-binding Conservative motion testing pipeline support among members of Parliament, using almost the same wording as the Alberta-Ottawa Memorandum of Understanding. And joining us now for a year-end interview, Corey Hogan, the MP for Calgary Confederation, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources as well. Mr. Hogan, good to see you, sir. Welcome back.
Good to see you, too.
All right, well, let's start on the MOU. How serious is your government about getting behind Alberta's drive for a new pipeline? What clarity can you give that would quell lingering questions in the wake of that vote on the Conservative motion?
Well, look, we want a pipeline built. That's why we have an MOU with the government of Alberta that underlines how that pipeline gets built. The Conservatives are happy to point out that it's a position that, required a bit of a lift by the Prime Minister, but we did it. And we did it because we know how important a pipeline would be to the economy of Canada. Which is part of why this is so unfortunate that the Conservatives brought forward a motion that had just the pieces of the MOU that they liked while ignoring a lot of the very important components that make it a full package. And, I've been saying to a few people in a few contexts, this is game playing, right? They've created a motion where voting yes makes a pipeline less likely and voting no makes a pipeline less likely. So I really wonder how much Pierre Poilievre wants a pipeline.
Now, how do you achieve unity within your own caucus, though, in getting behind this MOU? Divisions are evident. You need look no further than Stephen Guilbeault quitting cabinet.
That's true. I mean, divisions everywhere, right? You need to look no further than two MPs quitting the Conservative Party, one of them coming over to the Liberals. The reality is this is a big, diverse country, and there are a lot of viewpoints that are out there and that are going to be taken by various people. And the way you balance them is exactly how the Prime Minister did, by saying, okay, let's look at the whole picture. Let's get everything on the table. Let's talk about our environmental goals. Let's talk about our economic goals, and let's tie those together, which is exactly what the Memorandum of Understanding with Alberta does. And it's supported by a Conservative Premier, Danielle Smith. It is supported, of course, by Prime Minister Mark Carney. It's unfortunate that the whole MOU is not supported by Pierre Poilievre.
Okay, so on the point of the MOU, how do you view the responsibility now resting on the shoulders of the Alberta government in carrying the pipeline ball forward, earning social license?
Yeah, well, look, the MOU commits the government of Alberta to having conversations with affected parties, which I think is something that we would call best practice whenever you're building anything, right? You want to make sure that the communities are involved in that. You get better projects when that happens. And, Premier David Eby has said that he would be open to a West Coast pipeline under certain conditions. So we're not starting from nowhere, right? And I think that one of the things that makes that pipeline much more likely to happen is exactly the table that the Prime Minister has set with effective carbon pricing, with action on methane, and with investments in pathways, which of course would take carbon out of the air entirely, and by the way, relies on a strong industrial carbon price. So, I think we've got the conditions here, and now it's about doing the hard work.
Suspension of clean electricity rules, tanker ban exemption, emissions cap, all potentially on the table with this MOU. What does that say about your government's commitment then to climate policy?
Well, I think it says that we're going to be practical in our commitment to climate policy. When we talk about the clean electricity regs, the conversation we're having with Alberta is, okay, how do we get to 2050 net zero, something we all agree to, in a way that reduces or creates no more emissions or no additional emissions relative to base case? And how do we do that in a way that I think is flexible, is consistent with the idea that we're going to be a pragmatic government, that we're going to get down to the ground and we're going to work with provinces on things that work for them? Because of course, Alberta's electricity sector looks very different from BC's, looks very different from Ontario's or Quebec's, and so. By taking a practical approach to the CER, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can say, this works for Alberta. This doesn't create any more emissions, and this works for Alberta.
Thomas Lukaszuk, the former deputy premier, driving the now verified Forever Canadian petition, told us he's just returned from Ottawa not that long ago, where he met with your federal caucus. What sense of urgency is there from your side in quelling separatist efforts back home in Alberta?
Look, I mean, obviously the country needs to work for all of the provinces. I think we all know that, but I also don't want to overstate separatist sentiment. I mean, polls would show it between 20 and 30%. Most Albertans are fiercely proud Canadians, fiercely patriotic. And so there's always that line to walk between how do you acknowledge legitimate concerns and how do you not feed or validate, a separatist movement that is not a majority movement in Alberta. I think any Albertan knows that. And, I think that the way you do that is you just govern well, right? You try to make sure that you're being pragmatic. You try to make sure that you're working with people. But you also do have to have a moral core still, and you need to stand by your values, because I think Albertans also expect people to stand by their values.
A lot of focus, obviously, on the pipeline push. But what else is realistically on the radar where Alberta and nation-building projects are concerned?
Well, of course, we've already talked about pathways, which is part of the overall bundle with pipelines. In the platform, there was talk about high-speed rail between Calgary and Edmonton being explored. The reality is Calgary and Edmonton are major, major population centers, and they will benefit disproportionately, I'd even argue, from some of the investments in housing, some of the investments in infrastructure. And really, the foundation that the budget sets about making Canada more economically competitive, I mean, that should be music to every Albertan's ears. That's really playing to our strengths in business. And, it creates a good foundation that Albertans will definitely take advantage of, because we're an entrepreneurial people and we get things done when we're given the tools to get things done.
All right. One more question for you. Not yet a full year in. What has the experience of being a Liberal MP from Alberta opened your eyes to about governance?
Well, a lot of things. First, I'd say, look, the struggle can sometimes be real. We really need to make sure that Central Canada understands that Western Canada has a perspective and Western Canada has a distinct culture, and that we're not all the same, and that you've got to look at things in detail, not just with these broad brushstrokes. The thing that I think I've personally felt the most is just this is a 24/7 job. You know that going into it, but it's a different thing to feel it. And I miss how much I'm away from my kids and my wife. I miss how much I'm away from my home in Calgary. But it's important work and it's an important time. And I think what really struck me is just how passionate everybody here is about trying to make this country work. Whatever their definition of it is, but they want to make it work. They want to make things happen.
All right. We'll have to leave it there for time. Appreciate your time as always, Mr. Hogan. Thank you, sir.
Thank you kindly.
Corey Hogan is the MP for Calgary Confederation and Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.